Hey guys, welcome to the next tutorial. So nice and simple, and this time we're just going to get our input system set up and have it so we can look around. We'll try to get to that bit. And just a reminder, there's a link in the description to our Discord server, so if you get stuck, just pop in and we'll do our best to help. Okay, so we'll begin by setting up our inputs. So I'm just going to create a new folder for our inputs. And then inside here, I'm going to create a new input actions, which comes from the input system that we imported. So what I'm going to call this is I'm just going to call this default input. So I'm going to double click on that to open it up, and under action maps, I'm going to create a new one for character. And in the actions, we'll put all of our character actions inside here. So we'll start with movement, which will be the left analog stick in WASD, and we'll create a new one for view. So create a new one just by hitting that little plus, and our view is basically going to be the right analog stick and the mouse. So let's go ahead and set up the mouse first. So the action type here, we're actually just going to change to a pass-through, and we're expecting a vector 2. And then the binding, if we click the little drop down, we can go over to mouse and we'll just use the delta. And then for movement, fairly similar. So let's first remove this default binding here. We'll just right click on movement and add a 2D vector composite. And then inside here, we'll just call that WASD. And then for up, we will use W on the keyboard, down will be S, left will be A, and right will be D. I don't know why I'm looking for it in the list, because you can just click the little listen button and press the key you want. Okay, so inside this action, let's change it from a button to a pass-through as well, and the control type will be a vector 2. Okay, so now those two are set up. Let's just save that asset. We'll come off of this and tick the little generate C# class and hit apply. And then you'll see it creates a little C# class for their input. So we'll just click on our player, make sure that our character controller script is attached, which it is. So let's go ahead and open up that script. Okay, so we're going to remove the default things inside here. And we're going to make use of Unity's built-in awake. And what we'll also do is we'll create a private, that's not how you spell private, and we'll have default input. So this is the name of the input system that we made. I'm just going to call that default input. Okay, so the way we need to do this input system is we're just going to, firstly we need to create an instance of it. So we'll just create a new instance of itself. So now that it's set up, we need to make use of the actual events that are being called. So actually quite simple and easy to do. If we just do default input and then we do .character, so you see it's following the same structure that we just created. And then so now we should have movement. And then it has an event called performed, which is obviously when it meets any of the criteria that we set up in our mapping. So this event, we don't want to change it, we want to alter it. So we just want to add on to it. So we'll do plus equals, and then we need to create a reference to the event, because we need to make use of it. And then we can basically make use of the event here. So let's just quickly create I'm going to make these public. So we'll create a vector 2 for, I'm just going to prefix with input just so that we can tell later on that it's the raw input from the input controller. So I'll have input movement, and I'm going to duplicate that, and we'll have input view. Okay, so you can probably see what we're going to do now is we're basically going to set input movement equals, and then we'll get from the event, we'll read a value from the event, and then you need to specify what kind of value you're expecting in return. So obviously we're expecting a vector 2, and close that off. And then we need to do the same thing for the view. So I'm just going to duplicate that, change movement to view, make sure we use our input view. Okay, so this isn't going to work until we actually enable this controller. So we'll just make sure to call enable once we're done. Let's just go into Unity and we'll take a look at those public variables just so we can see that they're actually changing. Okay, so here's the two variables. We can go ahead and hit play. And we can see that WASD is definitely moving. And you can see that the mouse is also. Alright, so now we just need to make use of these. So let's create a update function. And we'll also create two more functions for calculate view, and we'll do the exact same thing for calculate movement. Okay, so I'm going to throw both of these in the update. The reason I'm separating them off will become more apparent later on. I'll go over it later. So let's put movement aside. We'll calculate the view. So the way we're going to be moving the camera is we'll move. Let's go over to Unity. So the axes we will be moving is the y-axis with the mouse X, and not the Z. The x-axis with the mouse Y. Okay. So we'll start off with we'll create a new we'll create a private vector 2. Can't seem to spell private today. Private vector 2, and we'll just call this new camera rotation. Okay, so the first thing we'll be doing is giving this a default value. So I'll set new camera rotation because it's a we're actually going to make that a vector 3, sorry. So we'll set it to we need to get the camera's local rotation. So let's go back over to Unity. And what we'll do is under player, we'll create an empty, and we'll just call this camera holder. And we'll pop the camera inside that camera holder. So let's just make sure that everything is zeroed out inside the camera. All the rotations, everything except from the scale. And then we'll move this camera holder to the height that we want the camera to be. So I'm just going to move it nearer the top of the capsule. Just like that. And then we need to create a reference to it. So let's create a header. We'll just call that references. I think I spelled that right. And then we'll just add a public transform for camera holder. And then we'll continue down here with our new camera rotation. So we need to set that to the camera holder dot local rotation, but we're going to get the Euler angles. So I'm going to be working with a vector 3, and then we'll modify it, and then we'll turn it back into a quaternion when we set it. So down here, basically what we're going to be doing is doing our camera holder dot local rotation equals, and then to turn it back into a quaternion, we can just do quaternion, if I can spell it, dot Euler, and we'll just pop that back in there. So obviously now if we make some changes in between here, it'll affect our camera's rotation. So let's make some changes to this new camera rotation. So it's going to be nice and simple. We're going to have a separate class to contain all of our default settings. So we'll go ahead inside scripts here and we'll create a new C# script. We're just going to call it scr_models. I'm going to put all my shared models inside here. So let's double click and open that up. So firstly, we need to get rid of these. And it won't reference from monoBehavior, inherit from monoBehavior, and we're going to make it a static class. So inside here, we'll also create a new region for player. And we'll create a public class for, let's not call it default, we'll just call it player settings, and then model. Okay, so a few things we need to throw in here. So we'll create a public float for the default, let's not call default again, we'll just say camera, or actually we'll use view for our view X sensitivity. And then we need to do the exact same thing for the Y. Okay, so we got our view sensitivities, X and Y, and then what we'll also do is we'll create tuples for view X inverted and view Y inverted. We'll just duplicate that and change that to a Y. And then let's go ahead and add a header as well. So we'll actually add the header right at the top. And we'll just say view settings. Alright, so we need to create an instance of this class inside our character controller. So nice and simple, we'll create another header. We'll call this settings. Then below that we'll make a public, and then the name of the class we just made, and we'll just call it player settings. Alright, so we need to include SCR models, so we can either hover over, click the little light bulb, and pop this in at the top. Or of course you can type it. So basically just lets the script know that we're using that script. Alright, so now we can make use of anything we put in the player settings. So let's go ahead down back to calculate view, and we're actually going to modify this rotation here. So we want to modify, if we go back to Unity we can actually check. If we click on camera holder, so if we do the Y first, so up and down on the mouse, we want to alter the X. Alright, so we'll do new camera rotation dot X, and then we'll alter it, so we'll just do plus equals. And then what we can do is we can access our player settings, dot sensitivity. This will be the Y sensitivity. Don't get confused with the X being here. We've now switched to our input. So the Y sensitivity, and then we'll times that by our input view dot Y, and then we'll also times that by time dot delta time. Okay, so now we've modified the X. If we go back into Unity, and let's just click on our player and set up some default setting values. So one thing to remember, which I didn't, is once we create a class in here inside our SCR models, we need to tell Unity to serialize it. So right at the top we're going to add using system. So we make sure we have that one included, and then we're just going to serialize this class here. Of course, if you don't want to put using at the top, you can just do system.serializable. So once the class is serializable, Unity will display it in the inspector. So once I reload, you can see we have our player settings here. Okay, so defaults I'm just going to throw in at 10. And we need to make sure we assign our camera holder. So let's hit play, and we'll just see what this looks like now. You can see we can look up and down. But it isn't clamped, so we can literally just go around and round. So let's go ahead and add in that clamp. So the good thing is, because we're just using a vector 3s, we can literally just clamp this value here. So we'll set it to an instance of itself, a value of itself, except obviously we're going to clamp this value, so we'll just do a mathf.clamp, And what this takes is the value you want to clamp and a min and a max. So let's create some variables for that. So we'll create another header. Actually, we can put it under settings. So we'll create a public float for view clamp y min, and the exact same thing except for the max. So we got a min and max. So the min will set to a default of -70, and a max will set to a default of 80. We'll obviously play around with that in the inspector and see what looks better. But let's go ahead and put those values in here. So if we go back to Unity now, we'll just double check that that is now clamped. So let's go ahead and hit play. And that is now clamped, which is exactly what we want. Obviously you'd play around with the values if you don't want the player to look down too much or up too much. Cool. Alright, so I think that's as far as we're going to get in this tutorial. Obviously subscribe, make sure you catch the next one. So in the next one we'll actually finish off the camera and actually start working on the movement. And then once we've done that, we can actually move on to bigger and better things. So again, thank you for watching. If you need any help, join the Discord, and I'll see you in the next one.